The impression I get is that there was quite a lot of movement between working at the quarries, working on the railway, the Great Western at that time, and agricultural work, with a movement from agricultural into the quarries, and in certain cases back again. That suggests a certain volatility of labour at that time. So it wasn't all necessarily a job for life if you had a job in the quarries. Presumably was that subject to demand and how things were going, and different employment concerns at the time?
I think best described as, up until that era, the main and practically only employer would indeed be agriculture, and if indeed one was lucky enough to get onto the railway, the demand, or the sources of supply were very, very little. It was quite a plum to get onto the railway. That was looked upon as being a huge step in the world and what have you, and also the quarries, much less sought after, but because of the scarcity of work, nevertheless the jobs had to be taken.
Okay, so coming back to quality of life for a moment, I have many memories of Ate the Witch just over the border in Kington, and almost up to the end, Gran, that's your mum, had no running water in the house, never did have a toilet or bathroom facilities in the house. Things today that children would just be absolutely aghast at, pumping water from a shed in the yard and having to go down the garden to go to the toilet being, you know, very rudimentary. Would life in the cottages at Limer's Row and so on have probably been just as basic in terms of quality of life?
Very much so. In fact, it's very significant. In as much as, yes, the conditions, there would be no main drainage at Limer's Row, and whatever, it would be a fabricated situation, and conditions. It was a roof over their head, but at the same time, conditions were quite grim. But also, there was a spirit of camaraderie amongst the people that I knew of who lived in Limer's Row. They were happy-go-lucky sort of people, in spite of the conditions under which they were living. They didn't see it that way. They've got a roof over their head, and they were quite happy.
Okay. Well, certainly looking at the number of children there were, we were talking 11 children, you can see why there would have been a lot of sharing, and some of the older children would have had to have moved out and got work and things. As younger children came along, there would have been no staying at home until you till you were older and got married. So we've talked about 5 of the children. The next one was William, who we know died at the age of 20 in 1894.
20, I believe 20. Yeah.
Okay. Do we know anything more about William?
No recollection or no information on whether he died more or less from natural causes, an accident. I personally would be inclined to think it was an accident, but I don't really know.
Okay. Next was Albert, Bert, as everybody knew.
Yes, Bert. I knew of Bert in as much as he's an agricultural worker, living in latter years in a place called Huntington. But working on a farm, he would be well fed and well looked after as regards eating and that sort of thing, and he lived there for many years.
Okay, next we have Sarah, or Sarah Ellen, or Nellie.
Yes, of course, due to the various names attributed to the siblings and what have you, yes, Nellie was, in actual fact, they went to the States in 1912 and made a very successful life for herself, as Pam would verify.
Okay. Do we know any more about the circumstances as to why she went to the States at that time?
We don't, but having in the last few weeks I came across a rather interesting article, in as much as at that particular time there were agencies throughout the country, probably throughout Europe, who set themselves up, or were set up, to encourage immigration for a very small fee and certain restrictions on what they did when they arrived in the States or Canada. And I would imagine, without knowing, that there's a likelihood that Nellie had partaken of such a scheme.
Yeah. And certainly, I've been watching a programme about the series about the Titanic recently, and I appreciate we've not got a direct link there, but they were talking about how the people could travel in third class in steerage on a one-way ticket, no return, for £5, which would be a lot of money, but you could go third class on the Titanic or a White Star liner for £5, and it was very much an emigration ticket, one way. It was assumed you were never coming back. So there was clear and large numbers of people on the Titanic, and of course other White Star and other company liners at that time, heading out of the main ports such as Liverpool, would have been on exactly that, a one-way ticket, knowing that was probably the last time they were going to see their home country and going off in search of a better life.
Mm-hmm.
Must have been a very big decision. Okay, so moving on next we have Martin.
Martin was always a very respected figure. I believe he died in about 1923-24, something of that nature, from the after effects of the First World War, primarily from the point of view of gas, but very much admired and whatnot. My mother, she would always refer to him as Dear Martin.
So Martin died just before you were born, as you say, about 1923.
Yes, that's right.
And the gas you're talking about was gas that was used in the trenches in the First World War, primarily mustard gas.
That's right, that's right.
And a lot of people who didn't die in the trenches directly died effectively of gas poisoning.
Oh yes, well, and three members of my family were affected, thankfully, only slightly by the effects of gas. One being my father, William, his brother Edward, who eventually died from breathing problems and whatnot affected by this gas, and of course Martin.
Okay. Now, Martin was married to Emily, and I think I'm right in saying...
Sorry for interrupting, but this is interesting. A second Emily. We have Emily of Presteighne, and this would be Emily of, shall we say, Staunton, one of the areas she lived. She, in actual fact, was of London birth, and obviously had met Martin either during or after the First World War, and she moved up to be with Martin on the world border.
And they did have children, I believe.
They did have two children. Once again, I'll have to be reminded of the name or think about it, but yes, a boy and a girl.
Okay. The next daughter was Alethea, who again unfortunately died prematurely. What do we know about Alethea?
Not a great deal, myself personally. I think it's fair to say that initially she wasn't a strong child and whatever, had the misfortune to fall onto an open fire and got badly burned, but as a result of the after effects of the burns, together with the fact that she wasn't obviously a strong constitution, she passed away at the age of about 14 or 15.
In 1899.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And finally we have Edith, Aunt Edith.
Oh yes. Well, Edith, she was always a character, very much loved. But what can one say? She married, had two children, lived very near to old Radnor, actually, a small place at the bottom of the hill called Walton, and was more or less widowed comparatively young, but at the same time always a happy-go-lucky character. In fact, a little story about Edith, during the Second World War, there was a scheme by where if you had bees and produced a certain amount of honey for home consumption and otherwise, you were entitled to an extra ration of sugar for the bees. Unfortunately, she cooked the books and was taken to court and fined 5 shillings for fraudulently obtaining sugar for her bees.
Really?
But that didn't deter Aunt Edie. She was great. She was a fantastic character.
Okay. Right, that's been very interesting going through all the families. Thank you very much indeed.
I hope it's of some interest, and can I say welcome and fun and what have you to both the United States and the Canadian counterparts of the family. Ta-ra!
Okay.